Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Hey, this is Lee Cantor. This is a very special Atlanta Business Radio because this is our GSU E&I special where we spotlight some of the exciting work that's happening at GSU. Today, we have with us Aziz Hashim and Ben Lawrence, and they are both critical components of the Franchising Entrepreneurship program at GSU. Let's kick it off with Aziz. Welcome, Aziz.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background and why it was important for you to kind of endow this professorship.
Sure. So my story goes to when I was a teenager and got a job to make a couple of extra dollars at Burger King. And this was sort of when I was 14, 15 years old. And I found myself all through high school and college working in fast food. And when I graduated with my degree in electrical engineering, I decided that I would rather pursue a career in entrepreneurship because of what I learned in the previous few years working for various owners of fast food restaurants in the area. This was in the Los Angeles area. So right from the very beginning, I've had this connection with the QSR and franchising industry. And so over time, as I developed and grew my business, I moved to Atlanta. And my very first business that I owned on my own and financed on my own was a KFC that was just a few doors down from the old Robinson, School of Business building on Broad Street. And so right from the beginning, my employees came from GSU, my customers came from GSU, and in fact, the decor that we put on the wall was a mural that was painted by a local artist that was a historical timeline of GSU. And he had the picture of all the various presidents and chancellors, and up until Carl Patton was the person who was at the time the president. So there are deep roots there. So when GSU came calling and gave me a opportunity to serve on their board at the Robinson School of Business, it was natural that I accompanied that opportunity with a chance to perhaps invest in GSU to promote something that had made my life and helped my family so much. And I felt that there are so many people that could learn about franchising, because one of the issues about franchising, as we'll talk more about today, is it's probably the quintessential American invention, but probably one of the most least understood business models in America. So, it's probably $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion industry directly and indirectly. Probably franchising employs maybe 10 to 12% of the U.S. population. Yet the average American knows very little about the workings of franchising. So I said, we need to do something about that. And GSU is the perfect place. I've got this affinity to it. I am really, really fond of the school. I'm going to open a store right next to it. So let's go further and invest some money and try to create a program where people can really understand the benefits of franchising. So that's sort of the background.
So now when you were starting out and you said, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, were you weighing it all like, hey, why don't I start my own mom and pop, restaurant?
Yes.
Was that part like on the whiteboard and you were like, well, I can also get into a KFC. And then how did you kind of make that decision to ultimately go franchise?
It was really fortunate in the way that, I didn't have to make that choice, because those few years during high school and college that I was working for others who owned franchises, including Burger King and KFC and others, I learned right away that, man, this is the greatest thing ever. Why would one want to risk opening, under your own name, where for a relatively very low cost, the royalties on a franchise business are amongst the smallest items on your P&L. And if you can rent a global name with with huge marketing, product development, name recognition, and all the other benefits, why take the risk just for a few pennies, to start your own? So to me, the risk reward thing was sort of never in question. Plus, I think, to some extent, my engineering degree helped in the sense that, I was always able to sort of weigh risks. That's what you get taught in engineering. You weigh all the risks and you figure out, where the issues might be. And to me, it was like a no-brainer from the outset.
So then once you made that decision, it was a matter of just choosing the appropriate franchise for you?
It was. And, that was, again, a very fortuitous thing because I had moved to Atlanta not really having an idea about what I was going to do. And I was walking up and down the streets of Atlanta. This is in late 1995. So right before the Olympics of 1996. And I saw that there were no KFCs in downtown. And I just cold called Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I said, I'm here. I've got some experience. I've worked for, a couple of franchisees, probably oversold myself a little bit. And so I would love to, because I had no access to financing or anything at the moment. I said, I would love to open one. And, long story short is, they said, if you were willing to open one, they made one condition. They said, we will give you a franchise for downtown Atlanta if you can get a restaurant opened before the Olympics. Because, it's the Olympics, the whole world is going to be here. And remember, at that time, KFC was owned by PepsiCo. So this is before the Yum spinoff. And PepsiCo said, if you can open it before the Olympics, we'll give you a franchise. And of course, I said, absolutely. I had no location. I had no money. But I said, I'll do it. And I got them to agree to give me a single unit license. And then, somehow, some way I scratched and clawed it and got it done and got it open.
So now, when it comes to the professorship, what was your vision of what did you want that to entail? Like, what was kind of the curriculum that you thought was important for GSU to be teaching its kids?
Sure. So one of the things I'm most proud about GSU, and I think that it has immense recognition now globally, over the last few years, is it's a school where it's you get a degree that you can actually use. You are able to go out and be productive immediately. They pride themselves, GSU does, in, imparting knowledge which is actionable. And the second thing is the diversity at GSU is just incredible, which is another thing I love. Obviously, I'm a minority, and so diversity is important to me. And then more importantly is the fact that, I believe in franchise entrepreneurship is a significant and very, very viable course of action and for a young person. Because I started off right after college in doing it. So I am living proof that you can become a successful and actually quite a significant entrepreneur using the franchise business model. So the vision was, let's have at least a place where with the right person, of course, we feel that Ben Lawrence is absolutely the right person. If there's the right professor, we can demonstrate the value and the efficacy of the franchise business model and demonstrate it as, a way that young people who are motivated and have the passion can really find a fulfilling business career.
And then why don't we bring Ben in for this? Ben, welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So you're when you were approached about this professorship, was this a hard decision for you, or was this kind of a no-brainer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I moved from Ithaca, New York, which I was a professor at Cornell. And I think that, Atlanta has a lot of benefits to someone that's interested in studying franchising. There's not a hell of a lot going on in Ithaca, New York. And if you look at a university like Georgia State, which is, in Atlanta, it's growing, it's serving a very diverse population of students. It just seemed like a great fit, as well as having Aziz's support. I mean, one of the greatest honors in academia is to have an endowed professorship in an area in which you study and have a passion for. So my family and I moved down here, and we love it here in Atlanta. And I think, there's so much potential for franchising entrepreneurship at GSU. There's really no other school, tier one research institution that is doing what we're doing here with franchising. So, each semester I teach a class on franchising entrepreneurship to undergrads. We're housed in the Cecil B. Day School of Hospitality in the Robinson College of Business, but it's open to all GSU students. And I really encourage all GSU students to take the course. This particular year, we started a franchise executive speaker series. So last week we heard from the COO and president of Edible Brands, Czech Boop. In a couple of weeks, we're going to hear from the CEO of Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Charles Watson. So there's just a wealth of knowledge here in Atlanta that helps to support the stuff that I'm doing in my class, and for me to connect my students with executives in many of the top franchise-based companies. So, at the end of the day, it was the best move I ever made.
So now, from the student standpoint, is the objective of them going through this class to hopefully encourage them to get involved as a franchisee, or is it to get employed with the franchisor? Like, how do you kind of measure success from the program?
So we have a couple of goals for the class. One is just to educate students generally about franchising. So, many of the students won't go out and become a franchisee. Some of the students think they might want to start a franchise, which is quite a difficult thing to do. And then some students, many of them will go work for franchise-based companies. So regardless of their major, it's basically an introduction in the class to kind of expose them to a distribution model, which, as Aziz said, is really misunderstood. And when they take the class, they start to realize that pretty much every brand they see in a strip mall is franchised. So regardless if they're a computer science student or a student studying marketing, the chances are at some point in their life, they're going to interact with a franchise-based company. And in the class, we really don't focus, we focus on restaurants, of course, but we do expose students to healthcare franchises, trash removal franchises. Pretty much any type of business in the U.S. can be franchised. And the goal of the class is to kind of connect students to individuals in the franchise community that can help them. So I've had students get jobs from guest speakers in the class. And I think it really opens their eyes to the potential of franchising in many different domains.
So now, when a person is going through the program, I would imagine that they're kind of fortunate, like you mentioned, Ben, that Atlanta is kind of a hub of franchising. People may not realize how many franchisors are based here in town. Can you talk a little bit about maybe why that is, or how you're able to leverage all of those kind of thought leaders?
Sure. I think if you look at U.S. cities, Atlanta has just an amazing concentration. And one of the reasons is because we have one company, Work Capital, that has, focused brands, inspire brands, driven brands. So there's over 100 franchise-based companies that are either owned or have headquarters here in Atlanta. So from that perspective, you have this whole ecosystem of individuals interested in franchising. You have franchise lawyers, and you have people that support the franchise community. And I think that really helps in supporting the programming that I have at Georgia State. It's very easy for me, for example, to reach out to somebody and get them to engage with my students. And I think going forward, as you see these brands become more portfolio in nature, where one company will acquire 3 or 4 brands. They want to find an area where they can attract great employees, where they can engage with, other individuals in the franchising community. And also when you think about Atlanta and the airport and the ability to get a workforce out there to, engage with your franchisee community, it's a lot easier. And then there's lots of really innovative stuff going on with franchising. So if we think about, Aziz and his work with companies like Franklin Junction, that's like innovating in that space. Those are some really exciting things that we can discuss and students can really engage with in this rich environment.
So, Aziz, you want to take that and talk about some of the innovations that are happening in franchising right now that maybe people aren't aware of?
Sure. I think there are a number of innovations. The one that we are working on in particular is called Franklin Junction. And what's neat about that is that, restaurants and food service has been a little bit slow to adopt technology over time for a variety of reasons that are probably beyond the scope of this discussion. But COVID and the pandemic sort of created a huge impetus for people, out of necessity, right? To jump into that. Restaurants were forced to close down. They had to find a way to fend for themselves and make ends meet, et cetera. And so it forced a lot of food service operators into exploring new models. So one of the models that we came up with, and we've actually trademarked the term host kitchen, HOST, as opposed to ghost kitchen and dark kitchens, which many people may have heard about. And what our premise is that we're sort of the Airbnb of the restaurant world, in the sense that we go to restaurants and say, if you have extra capacity, if you're not as busy as you would like to be, if you've already invested a lot of money in a building, in a kitchen, in staff, in training, in equipment, what if we could bring you additional things that you could sell from your kitchen for delivery only, because we don't want to confuse or we don't want to take away from your normal guest traffic that you have. But what if we brought you a really compelling series of brands that your same employees could cook in the back, and DoorDash and other delivery companies could just pick up, and all that's done for you is without any cost on your part, because you've already paid for the equipment and the building and the staff. You could have additional revenue. Much in the same way, if you've got an extra bedroom or you've got an extra house by the beach and you want to rent it through Airbnb, you already own the house. All you're doing is renting out that capacity, which you don't happen to be using at this time. So in a very similar way, what Franklin Junction does is it takes restaurants and other food service operators, including hotels and convenience stores, anyone really that's got any kind of a kitchen equipment, and saying, you're a host, and we're going to pair you up, if you agree to work with Franklin Junction, with various brands. And that way you can have extra revenue. From the concept point of view, the brands that we bring in, they're often brands that want to expand beyond their geographic location. So, for example, one of our top concept brands on our roster is Nathan's Famous Hot Dogs, for example, which everyone's familiar with them and their 4th of July hot dog eating contest and all that. A very world-recognized brand, publicly traded company, and we have an agreement with them. They're mostly located in the Northeast United States, in New York and New Jersey, and we have been able to implement Nathan's hot dog sales, across the United States by putting them in carefully selected host kitchen clients of ours. So Nathan's gets this expansion all across the United States, and restaurants that have extra capacity get to sell Nathan's under the Nathan's brand. So they get the recognition of the brand, just like franchising, is famous for, is giving you that brand recognition, and they create extra money. The best part about the model that we really like is neither the restaurant has to invest any money because we're using their existing kitchen, their existing capacity, and neither did Nathan's have to invest any money. They didn't have to convince anyone to build a store or anything like that. They were just able to sell their proprietary products in a variety of different areas. So, we feel that this type of matchmaking, usage of extra capacity is wonderful, but the real innovation is also the technology behind it, knowing which restaurants should be selling what products, which we pride ourselves on. We have that proprietary algorithm that we have created to know what product would sell best in what area, et cetera. So we do this back end, matchmaking and technological and business analytics analysis to help both parties maximize their revenue. So that's an example of an innovation that, is really exciting and promises to bring a lot of more variety to the consuming public. Because now, if you're a customer in anywhere other than New York and New Jersey, you couldn't really think about getting Nathan's hot dogs because you'd have to go to New York or New Jersey. Well, now you could be in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you could be enjoying Nathan's hot dog products. So customer wins, restaurant operator, what we call the host, they win. The concept, in this case, Nathan's hot dog, they win. Everyone wins from this solution. So we're really excited about this project.
And then from the way the revenue is, it's a revenue share, then based on somebody buying whatever that thing is, it just split amongst the different constituents?
Yeah, absolutely. Franklin Junction, just like an Airbnb or an Amazon or any other digital platform, makes a very small fee for putting the match together and helping market and making sure that revenues increase. The brand, in this case, in Nathan's, would get a fee that they would normally get if they were licensing the product to a bricks and mortar franchisee or licensee. And of course, the host gets the revenue because they are cooking the food and they are selling the food. So everyone gets their proportional revenues, and no one's got any capex in it. So it's highly, highly incremental. Even if you do a moderate amount of incremental sales, if you're a restaurant, the margins are tremendous because you have no additional expense.
And then you're leveraging these third-party delivery systems to help kind of facilitate so that these restaurants,
Absolutely.
These hosts,
100%.
The host restaurants only
we have contracts,
right? And then the hosts are only digital. They're not. There's no bricks and mortar. I mean, they're obviously bricks and mortar, but they're not. That brand is only available kind of through these third-party delivery apps.
Yes, that's the beauty of it. This is a entirely virtual, concept. So as far as a regular customer that's patronizing that host, they would have no idea what's going on in the kitchen, and neither is it, does it affect their experience at that restaurant in any way, shape, or form. So this is very much done, using existing kitchen capacity and not to disturb the front of the house capacity, and does not involve anything of that nature. And you're right, the advent over the last 3 or 4 years of the Grubhubs and the DoorDash have really accelerated this trend as well. The ability to have that last mile delivery service is what makes this, entirely possible.
And then the brand then could expand to hundreds of locations literally in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, our record was last year, there was one brand that we were able to open 180 units in 9 days. So you're talking about very, very, very rapid expansion. And the other thing that's a benefit to the concept is that, it allows you to test your product in markets without having to spend millions of dollars or getting, people to build traditional restaurants. You can first come in through a Franklin Junction process, see if there is customer acceptance of your product in a given area, and then you can choose if you like to open a bricks and mortar store, right? But now you're doing so with much more confidence because you've had this ability to sort of test the market with your product. And think about this for international brands that want to come to the U.S., right? If you're an international brand, you'd have to spend millions of dollars hiring a team, putting a thing together, buying real estate or renting property, and you still don't know whether your product would be accepted by the American public. In this case, an international brand can just do a partnership with Franklin Junction, say, hey, will you put us in 20 or 30 units and see if it works? And if it works, then we can invest the time and money to do a traditional bricks and mortar application if we want to. We actually believe that, Franklin Junction done correctly, they may never need to, and say, if we can get into hundreds of stores and sell our product without having to open a single bricks and mortar facility, why should we invest that money? This is a much better way to get our product out there.
Well, you mentioned that the pandemic probably accelerated some of this kind of thinking and this kind of innovation. Is there any other kind of unintended consequences of the pandemic that you see that have impacted franchising? I would imagine because of the pandemic, a lot of stores went out of business. So maybe there's some real estate opportunities out there for brands that are trying to expand that have kind of survived the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. Any kind of a recession, any kind of a downturn, even 2008, 2009 resulted in, the unfortunate event of some of the weaker players going out of business, and the pandemic was no different. I think the National Restaurant Association reported that, maybe 16% of all restaurant facilities were closed down permanently, which is a big number. It could be as much as, 100,000. One doesn't know if that's the exact number, but it's not a small number. But the thing is, a lot of those, as you mentioned, will be picked up by other brands because that infrastructure has value. it's really expensive and difficult to open a restaurant in most jurisdictions because it's a very capital intensive activity. When you talk about health requirements and, city requirements to build a restaurant, it's not easy, costs a lot of money. And once you have it, you really kind of benefit from what we call second generation spaces in our industry. That is, there was a restaurant there before, and now we're going to go back and put another restaurant in there, but using much of the same infrastructure. So that is definitely, an outcome. Another one is, the customer's acceptance of curbside pickup and other forms of delivery. Of course, we saw that, but there's also a big trend towards, contactless payment, for example, curbside pickup, for example, lots of other types of technology uses, which heretofore really hadn't been particularly, well adopted in the franchise space.
Now, Ben, from your standpoint, what do you see ahead in terms of this the franchise entrepreneurship class? Like, how is that evolving?
Well, I think that Aziz is right. The model of franchising was stagnant for quite a while, and I think that we're seeing some really innovative approaches to franchising. One innovative approach is that franchisors are seeing that by helping their franchisees, at least funding their stores in the beginning, especially for younger franchisees that might not have the capital, we're seeing some franchisors looking for some partnerships there where they're helping those franchisees in the beginning to start up their stores so they can pick the right ones. And then this investment in technology, right? So one thing the pandemic has shown is that some of these companies have really failed for a long time to invest in technology, and that's why we've seen the Grubhubs and the delivery companies of the world eat away at the profitability of restaurants. And so we talk a lot about that in class, not just the franchise model itself, but many of these forces that are driving innovation in the industry. Franchising is not going anywhere, right? It's the main form of distribution of many products, including restaurants and hotel rooms in the U.S. marketplace. But there's lots of really interesting, innovative ways that smart students that see things from different perspectives can come up with new businesses that help businesses thrive and survive during these times. And I think it's an exciting time for franchising. I think that the franchise model is much more suitable to these issues around the pandemic than being an independent operator. And many franchise companies in the restaurant space have actually done better, given that they have the drive-through capacity and the technology to deliver and the infrastructure. So we're going to continue to grow the program and outreach to the community here in Atlanta. Hopefully when we get past this pandemic, we're going to have more in-person engagement with the community. But I envision Georgia State in the future being the leader in franchising research and education in the world.
Well, congratulations on all the success. And this must be such rewarding work for both of you to be able to see your life's work kind of grow in this manner and have the impact you are having on all these young people. Absolutely. And I think that, it's people like Aziz who are paying back and helping the next generation of franchisees build businesses to climb that social ladder and create wealth for their own families. Now, if somebody wants to learn more, what's the best way to get a hold of either one of you or both of you? You can visit my website, franchisingprof.com. I've got research there. I've got connections to the class materials. That's franchisingprof.com. Good stuff. And Aziz, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, is nrdcapital.com the best website?
Yeah, absolutely. Just go to that website and you'll be able to find me on the team section, and from there get into my contact information.
Good stuff. Well, thank you both for participating on the show today. You're doing important work and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much
for having me.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on GSU ENI Radio.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay, Atlanta's new standard in payroll. To learn more and get your first month free, go to onpay.com.